we have a society in which there is no control of access to lethal military weapons and no regulation, but there's highly controlled regulation of women's most private, intimate, personal needs and health issues.
Our guest today is Dr. Warren Hern, a physician who has spent his career putting his life on the line for the sake of women's health in America. He's been performing abortions since the 70s, and retirement is not in his vocabulary. In his new book, Abortion in the Age of Unreason, a doctor's account of caring for women before and after Roe v. Wade, he shares stories from the front lines of providing and fighting for essential reproductive care. Dr. Hern, welcome to Hysteria.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell me about your new book and how you knew it was time to finally share your full story.
In this book, at the beginning, I show different examples of experiences that I had as a medical student and as a young physician that showed me how difficult it was for women to control their fertility and how dangerous pregnancy was and what they would do to interrupt the pregnancy if they were determined to do so. And the fact that as from a public health point of view, this is a very dangerous situation. Obviously, many women died. One of the accounts is when I was working as a Peace Corps physician in Brazil in the 60s. And one of my Brazilian colleagues took me through the maternity ward in the maternity hospital. There was one ward full of women recovering from childbirth and two wards full of women who were recovering or trying to recover from the effects of unsafe abortion. 50% of those women died. Most of them were too sick to save by the time they got to the hospital. And then I became aware of the fact that unsafe abortion was, at that time, I think still is, the leading cause of death for young women in their reproductive years throughout Latin America. And I got back to the United States at about the time that abortion was made legal in Colorado for the first time. I was working then, studying public health and working for the Office of Economic Opportunity Family Planning Division, which were trying to help women have access to voluntary fertility control of all kinds. And then I came back to Colorado. In 1973, I was asked to set up what was the first private nonprofit abortion clinic in Colorado, and I was the founding medical director. There was one occasion where, in a two-day procedure, where we had people coming on the first day with a physical exam, counseling, and all that sort of thing, and then I would put in a laminaria stick, which is a medically prepared seaweed, to open up the uterus overnight. And then they would come back the next day to have the abortion procedure. This is in the first trimester. And I walked into the operating room on the first day for one patient. I remember her quite well. She had red hair, she was in her mid-30s, and she was shaking uncontrollably. And I said, what's wrong? Tell me what the problem is. How do you feel? And she said, well, it's so different. You're a doctor. It's clean. The lights are on. The windows are open. And then she told me about her illegal abortion that had happened before, which was the most humiliating and frightening experience of her life. Then she looked at me and said, please don't ever stop doing this. So I didn't. Mm-hmm. So that is a very important part of why I'm doing what I'm doing at this stage. And after leaving that clinic at the end of about a year, I decided that performing abortions was the most important thing I could do in medicine. So I opened my own private practice and called it Boulder Abortion Clinic. And so the book is really about that whole experience. And then I raised a number of other points about the view that pregnancy is a normal thing and a woman is most normal when she's pregnant. It's the most normal thing can happen to her. Okay, what does that mean when she's not pregnant? That means she's not normal? That's what she's for, is to be pregnant. So that raised the question of the illness parameters of pregnancy, which I described. To make a very long story short, the result of that analysis was my conclusion that the treatment of choice for pregnancy is abortion, unless the woman wants to have a baby. If she doesn't want to have a baby, forcing her to continue the pregnancy and have a baby is forced labor, it's slavery, it's cruel and unusual punishment, and it's unacceptable. There may have been a time when we were almost extinct as a species when you really had to have every woman be able to have a baby every time she could. That's long past. So the last part is the discussion of the fact that the Republican Party has used the abortion issue as its hammer and tongs for power for the last 50 years. And the anti-abortion Christian fanatics have used the Republican Party to get power, and they have a symbiotic relationship. So the Republican Party is now controlled by the most fanatic right-wing Christian fanatics who want a fascist Christian theocracy in the United States, and they will stop at nothing to get it, including supporting a person like Donald Trump for president, who is the most depraved, hideous person who has held public office in the United States. And so that's what this election is about. And clearly the Republicans have used the abortion issue to get power so they can control the Supreme Court and change the laws so that it allows them to continue the process of shoveling money from the pockets of the poor and the middle class to the pockets of the rich. So that's the overall experience. On an individual level, abortion is a fundamental part of women's health care, and it must be available to them without any interruption. We have a society in which there is no control of access to lethal military weapons and no regulation, but there's highly controlled regulation of women's most private, intimate, personal needs and health issues.
Well, you mentioned extremism, and I know this is probably not a fun place to dwell, but how has your career made you a target for extremists? And you had a close friend who was murdered by extremists, Dr. Tiller, in 2009.
He wasn't murdered. He was assassinated. That's different.
Okay.
Murder is when you kill somebody to take their money.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a political assassination. Mm-hmm. And on all the hit list, there have been 5 physicians who specialize in performing abortions who have been assassinated by anti-abortion fanatics. This is political violence. The rest of American society is getting around the idea that political violence is not a good idea, even though it has permeated American history since the Europeans washed up on the shore.
What precautions do you have to take on a daily basis to make sure that extremists aren't able to get to you or harm you or people who work at your clinic?
Well, it's a very important question, and it's hard to answer. One answer is that I'm looking at a bulletproof window. We work behind 4 layers of bulletproof windows. We have 24-hour closed-circuit TV, and we have many strategic security measures to keep us safe inside the building, which only works as long as somebody doesn't try to bomb the place, which has happened on many occasions. Once I leave the building, I'm at risk of assassination, and that's true for every doctor who does abortions, for every person who helps a doctor who help women, whether they're a nurse, a counselor, a secretary, or cleaning the place or whatever. And it's important to understand that the anti-abortion movement is radical and fanatic. They are opposed to basic premises of Western society, especially Western democracy. They will stop at nothing, and they will accept any level of political violence to achieve their means. And that has been part of the Republican strategy now for 50 years. Trump constantly calls for political violence, and he organized it on January 6th a couple years ago. And that is their motive. And American people need to understand that is what is at stake. With this election, we either have democracy or dictatorship. Mm-hmm. And if we lose democracy, we will never get it back.
Let's talk about Dobbs a little bit, the case that overturned Roe v. Wade. How has your practice been impacted in the 2 years since the Dobbs decision? What changes have you seen as a physician?
Well, in the first place, from a historical point of view, these changes began long before the Dobbs decision in states where there were very severe restrictions on access to abortion services. So I've been getting patients from all over the country for a long time, almost 50 years. The second thing is that when the state of Texas imposed the SB 8, making abortion illegal in Texas in 2021, we started getting a great influx of patients with further along in their pregnancies because they couldn't get abortion care in Texas, and increasingly they couldn't get it in surrounding states because the women in Texas were going into the other clinics and the other states, and the clinics were packed and people, they had long waiting lists. And by the time a woman from Texas got to her appointment, she was too far along to have the abortion in a first trimester abortion clinic. And so they wound up coming here or some other colleague who does later abortions. Now, the Dobbs decision had an immediate catastrophic effect across the country because they were the trigger laws that said if Roe versus Wade falls, then this law outlawing abortion goes into effect immediately. And that's what happened. So from that point, we're increasingly inundated with patients from red states who could not get medical care. And also in other states where the clinics, where access to abortion was better, but the clinics were inundated with patients from other parts of the country. In my book, I have the day when it made it officially a crime in the state of Idaho to treat a woman who was pregnant in the emergency room. You know, one of the things that I have studied is the work of Francois Mariceau, who was a French physician in the 17th century in France. His textbook, which was the first one ever published, was published in 1668. La maladie des femmes grossesses et accouchées, the illnesses of women who were pregnant and giving birth. His own sister died in front of him from a pregnancy. Medical care for women in 17th century France was primitive, but it was not illegal. In the United States, it's illegal to help women. And as long as women, for people like Donald Trump, that's the way it's going to be. So I think that people need to understand that the election and the politics have a direct bearing on their survival and health and the health of their families. So that's one of the main messages of my book.
Well, you mentioned the fact that in Idaho and other places, it's difficult for women to get health care even for wanted pregnancies. And on this show, we've discussed that there are fewer people going into obstetrics and gynecology as a result of some of the uncertain legal field out there for them. Are you currently training younger doctors? Is it harder to find new people to teach to perform abortions given the climate right now?
The answer to both of your questions is yes. I am training young physicians, and some of them come to me highly prepared, having completed residencies in board certification obstetrics and gynecology. Others don't have that, but they have extensive experience in helping women in women's health care. And I have right now 3 excellent young physicians who are helping me. And I love taking care of patients, but I decided many years ago that I need to turn this over to other physicians. So I'm helping the other physicians work in my practice. I'm still seeing patients. I'm seeing patients tomorrow. But this is, and it is hard for a young physician to decide to do this because it isn't just the physical danger of being assassinated by the fascists running the Republican Party or the Christian religions, but it is very stressful, and I think that there are many components of it that are complicated, and I think that in most fields of medicine, you feel appreciated and rewarded for doing the work to help people, and it is true that our patients are very grateful, But the big message from our society has been, go away or we'll kill you. And that is the way it has been.
That is pretty heavy stuff. Is there anything that gives you hope right now?
Well, I think that one of the things that gives me hope are the young people, the young physicians. Right now, the most important thing that gives me hope is the possibility of keeping the Democrats in control of the White House with Kamala Harris and having the Democrats control the Congress. If we don't have that, we're in deep trouble because you have fascists who are running the Republican Party and they're in control of the current House of Representatives, and they threaten to take control again of the U.S. Senate. They're not living the modern world. They're not connected to the modern world. And they're making rules about women that are oppressive. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that because of the revitalization of the Democratic campaign with Kamala Harris and Governor Walz, I feel there's a very strong hope of the Democrats winning this election and staying in power, and that's one of the things that gives me hope.
Well, we better hope we win. Dr. Warren Hern, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for writing this book. Listeners, Abortion in the Age of Unreason, A Doctor's Account of Caring for Women Before and After Roe v. Wade is available in bookstores.